future of office space in Liverpool. And as Alvaro said, we've got a panel which covers all aspects of our office accommodation in the city. So I'm delighted to welcome Andrew Byrne, chair of the property group at Professional Liverpool, also a director of CBRE in the city. Julie Johnson, who's the chair of the commercial district BID and also the business operations partner at Morecrofts. Nicola Mason, who's the HR and operations director at Napthens, and Stephen Cowperthwaite, head of Liverpool MIPIM and the principal and managing director for Liverpool at Avison Young. So it's great to have you all here this morning. We have, as we know now, we've got a large group of attendees, so thank you for that this morning. The future of office space in Liverpool is what we want to look at today. And particularly it's relevant because it has changed enormously, hasn't it? The use of office space has changed enormously in the last 14 years. We were anticipating change in Liverpool as we moved into the 21st century, and we moved through, and we were looking for a world of improvements in the centre of Liverpool. That was before March of 2020 and the pandemic hit, and that accelerating change into flexible working, home working, because we were forced to. But how much of that is permanent? How much of that will remain once we can start coming back into the office? And what will be the impact on our cities? Already we're seeing slow recovery back into our hospitality and resident and retail, but we're not seeing that take up yet in our office space. So that's what we will be looking at this morning. And then really, how can we as a city support offices? How can we support our businesses and enable them to cope with the adjustments? And then right at the end of this event, I'm going to be coming to each of you and thinking about what your views are for the next year, the next 5, and what will the office world be like in 20 years. But before we do that, let's start looking at the nuts and bolts of this. Andrew, if I can come to you, you are the chair of the Professional Liverpool professional group in terms of property, and you've very much been working on the office market review for this year. I know just before we started, you told me your own views on where the office market has been. How bad has it been in the last 12 months? What are we seeing in the figures that you're getting from all your fellow agents?
2020 was unprecedented. Heard that a lot on the news, haven't we? In terms of sort of take-up levels, it was vastly down on what we were expecting. I think I stood in front of everyone in, I think it was the March the 17th, so the day before lockdown last year, and said we're expecting big things for 2020. We're expecting to try and get to a stage where, you know, we've got very, very limited supply and we're needing the development to come forward. Step forward to the end of the year, and actually in the city centre, the take-up was just over 143,000 square feet. I think the total take-up across the whole region was about 282,000. So down about 58% on year on what we'd expect. To be expected though, because why would you take an office when you're being told you can't even occupy it and you've got to stay at home? That didn't really change throughout the year. There were many spates where we actually saw people want to come back to the office, where, you know, eat out to help out. Everyone was encouraged to come into town and do things like that. So they were encouraged, and then thought, well, actually, I can start taking my office, start doing the searches. But a lot of them were false starts. You've now seen that's actually starting to come to fruition in 2021. Some of the people who were looking throughout 2020 have now taken space. Q1, you saw about 78,500 square foot of take up across the region. And in 2020, for comparison, it was just over 116,000. So still down on what we'd expect. But bear in mind, in Q1 of 2020, we were saying that this is going to be a great year. This is the, you know, all the moons are aligned. We're ready to go. We've got limited supply, rents are going up, and people are starting to look building. And Q1 of this year, everyone was still told stay at home. So we've got a lot of things under offer, and there's a lot of availability which is going to dissipate. And I'd like to think that towards the end of the year, you'll actually see a much more improved take up for 2021 compared to 2020.
And are you seeing any sectors that are benefiting greater, or any sectors more active?
So the mainstay of the Liverpool market has always been the professional sector. That performs well year on year, and there was no difference last year. That was the main take up. I think the first deal which was done once COVID announcements was made, was to an accountant on taking a 10-year lease in number 1 Temple Square. But then we've also seen the health and life science sector and the creative sector go strength to strength. I think it's around about 10% year-on-year growth as they're going forward, and that's across the region. We saw quite a few NHS, as you'd expect, and then the creatives were starting to see the fruition of what was Startup City. So I think it was like 2010-11 we were saying we're a startup tech city. You're seeing those companies now grow. They're now becoming much more established SMEs, and they're the 3 which are doing well year on year now.
And are we seeing the same story across the boroughs in the city region and out in the districts?
Yeah, as and where possible, yes. The issue we've got with the out-of-town market is even more so than the supply in the city centre is nothing's been built there since 2010 across pretty much everywhere. I think the newest development to come forward is, I think it's Hythe in the Wirral. That's coming forward now. That's probably something that will be let quite well. It's got good connectivity into both the city centre and the wider regions, but it hasn't stacked for many years. The developers can't make it work. The rents just didn't support the build cost. You know, we were looking at some areas in, say, Speak, where headline rents were £9 a foot, and then you had incentives. It makes no sense for someone to build an office. They may as well go and spend their money elsewhere.
So we talked earlier about rents in the city centre, and actually we've seen an improvement in rents, although it's been very small activity. But headline rents, you're saying, are moving forward and actually starting to move into areas where we may be able to support development.
Absolutely. The city centre rents have, and even out of town as well, out of town rents are starting to move up as well, but the city centre rents have recorded the highest ever. £28.50 per square foot in Royal Liver. It's the highest in the city. I think in 2007 it was set at £22 a foot, and it's taken us a long time to get back to that following the financial crash. And the reason behind that is that in 2007 there was 2.5 million square foot of availability. As at today's date, the whole market's sub 500,000 square foot, and the actual good quality space that people are now looking for, you know, looking for air conditioned amenities, everything that's over and above just 4 walls, it stands at less than 200,000 square foot. In a typical year, that's about 50% of take up for the city centre. So it's screaming out for good quality development to come forward, but rents are now starting to support it.
Good. Thanks for that, Andrew. We'll come back to you. There are some questions, but we'll come back to those in a later date. So if I could turn to Julie. Julie, you're the operations partner at Morecrofts. Obviously, you've been working from home along with a number of staff, but people are starting to come back. But you're also the chair of the Business Improvement District, and your focus is on the commercial district at this moment in time. I mean, from the BID's perspective, what do you think is the significance of office space and office workers in the commercial district?
Well, I think the office space and the office workers are actually at the heart of the commercial district, and it's the employees in the business that keep the district alive. I mean, look how quiet it was when we were through lockdown, when everybody's had to work from home, but the majority of employees love and still love working in the commercial district, and we are seeing a return back to the commercial district, thankfully. We are seeing offices starting to build up and fill in now. We've got the cafes, the restaurants, the shopping within a short walking distance. And I think that we still will see that in the future. We might see a hybrid, we might see people working from home and in the office, but I certainly still think that the office space and office workers are going to be really important to the commercial district in the future.
Yeah, but from your perspective as an employer, how are you going to be managing your space as you move forward?
We've got no plans to change the size of our space. We're quite happy with the size of our space, and in the city centre particularly, our staff are delighted that we've got so much space and they feel comfortable and safe when they come into the office because we can socially distance. And I think that's going to be important for businesses when they move forward. So although I think generally we will see smaller sizes of spaces getting taken up, I think that offices will still be needed in the future at the sizes that people are in now, particularly for social distancing.
Yeah, but do you think that you're going to have employers clearly going to be changing their working patterns? And I'll come on and ask Nicola the same question in a few minutes, but you're going to be changing working patterns now. Instead of the flexi working, the sort of the flexible hours, it's more of a flexible workspace. So actually office hours will perhaps extend because people will want to come in at 10 o'clock in the morning and work through till 7 at night, or?
Yeah, I mean, from a legal practice point of view, from Morecrofts' point of view, we've actually been open right throughout lockdown because we've held court cases from our offices. So we've had staff in the office throughout, and although we're seeing more of them come back to the office now, we're also seeing that we've done surveys and our staff would like a hybrid model in the future. So they want to come into the office a few days, work from home a couple of days, and I think that will be the way we'll go. But you're right, we're going to see changes in working hours as well because people are coming in earlier, staying later. And I think that will also be good for the hospitality industry because people are taking them long lunches, they're meeting up with friends and colleagues. I think the whole ethos of working in a city centre is changing, where sometimes you come in 9 o'clock, work your socks off till 5 or more and not take a lunch. People want that now. They want to have that break in the middle of the day. So they might only be coming into the office a few days a week, but they're making more of coming into the city centre. So they're actually coming in earlier, working later, staying for dinner, maybe out in town with colleagues. And that's what we're seeing from Morecrofts. Yeah,
and Julie, we heard you speaking on Radio Merseyside earlier in the week about the importance of employers recognising employees' mental health and ensuring that employers are able to give support. Can you tell us some of the initiatives that you're considering for that?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I've sent out since the beginning of lockdown is something called, it's a monthly calendar called Action for Happiness. And that's just one of the things, but mental health is so important. And particularly where people have not been in the office for 6 months or more and they're returning to the office. I think it's really important for employers to manage that expectation of, the people who've been in right through, it's like the norm for them now. They're used to wearing the masks when they're walking around the office. They're used to sanitising their hands as soon as they walk through the door. And, when they're talking to clients need a negative COVID test before they can come into our offices. And they're the sort of things that are completely not the norm for somebody who hasn't been in the office for 12 months. So managing that mental health and also your clients' mental health as well, because their fears and anxieties of coming into town and coming into the office if they've not been to visit for 12 months is also really important. So, we've done surveys with our staff, so we know the numbers that want to work hybrid. Some people want to come back and work in the office every day because they haven't got facilities at home or they prefer that social contact in the office. And I think it's also really important for training and development of staff as well, to make sure that you do have some time where the whole team are in the office together, because they need that to be able to bounce off each other and mentors and be there for each other. So I think we need all of that, and we need that physical presence in the city centre to do that.
But we're seeing a change in the commercial district, haven't we, Julie, over the last 5 years, and an increase in residential, an increase obviously in leisure, looking at Castle Street with the without walls, but also within your work as chair of the commercial district, you've been very keen on pushing the bid to support art and culture in the cities, in the commercial district, to get that balance, and particularly the support for the biennial, which has continued for the 5 years. Yeah, I mean, can you tell us a little bit about why you believe it's important for that and for the businesses to support art and culture?
Yeah, I think it's really important, I think, and even more so now, for us to have that complete mix of the economy and for us to support the arts and the creatives and the cultural, the museums, the theatres, the cinemas, everything. I think it's even more important now that people do want that good mix in their lives for us to be able to support that. But initiatives like Light Night we've got on Friday, that's something that we've supported as the BID. We've got networking events that we've got, which start next Tuesday with Margot Story from Exchange Flags. 12:30, go on to the LiverpoolBIDCompany.com website and you can book on to them. We've also got Shiverpool walking events as well that we're encouraging people to do. So getting all of these things and all of these events from the BID and the BID initiatives will hopefully, you know, the staff love all of these things and getting involved in these, and that will also help employers to be able to attract people to work in the city centre. So all of the initiatives that we do as a BID, you know, keeping the streets clean, making sure that they're safe for people to walk around in, all the stuff we've done for COVID over the past 14 months with businesses to make sure that people, when they're coming back into the city, they feel safe in doing so.
Great, thanks, Julie. Nicola, if I can come to you, you're the Operations and HR Director at Napthens, and you've actually you've moved into the Plaza during this pandemic. Can you tell us a little bit about your own company, why you believe that it's right to move into the Plaza and how you will be operating from there?
Yeah, of course. So we moved into Southport in 2016. So moving into Liverpool has sort of felt like a natural progression for us. And I think all the things that Julie was talking about there in terms of culture and the environment within Liverpool feels right and is a really good fit for us at Napthens. So we actually moved into Liverpool in 2019, about 3 years ago, and we've just grown from strength to strength. So what we are now doing is moving into a larger suite into the Plaza, and I think that's worked really well for us. The management team over there have been really great in terms of supporting our growth and really supportive and friendly, which is always great to see. And now obviously there is so much development happening there, which really fits with what we are trying to achieve for our people, which is, I think, you know, we've covered that the office space needs to be reimagined. I think our main focus is making sure that our people have the best working environment and the best facilities that they can have. And I think that really plays into what the Plaza are trying to achieve now with, you know, all the development work that's going on. And it's that really exciting to see, actually.
That's excellent, isn't it? So in terms of your own company, how have you adapted to flexible working now? Is that something you've always offered, or because of the pandemic you're changing?
Yeah, I think we have always had flexible working, but I mean, obviously everyone can apply for flexible working in a formal capacity, but we have had an informal arrangement of sort of work your hours to suit you. I think the pandemic has really fast forwarded us into thinking about this blend of working office and home much sooner than perhaps we otherwise would have done, which has led to us now saying that at the end of Boris's roadmap, whenever that may be, that it will be our standard working week will look like 3 days in the office and 2 days at home. And that's in response to our people telling us that that's what they want to see, that they like working from home, but they really sort of crave being back together and having a, you know, professional office working environment. So that's what we've gone with, and obviously, you know, there will be variations therein. There'll be some people who want to be in more and some people want to be in less, and that is all fine as well. But our standard working week will now be 3 days and 2 days at home. And
do you think that's something that all employers will have to follow?
I certainly think.
Yeah,
I certainly do think that most employees want to see a blend of working now. And I think it's very much that we've seen how working from home can give you more flexibility to be able to do other things. We might not want to replicate necessarily all of the things that we've had to do during the pandemic, including homeschooling. I think I speak for many. But I think, you know, there are elements of that work-life balance that I think people want to see. And actually, I've said for a long time, it's not really work-life balance. It's because it's not one or the other. Work is a big part of your life. So you need to think of it as a work-life continuum. And how work fits in to help you with that, with your life, with your career, is really key. So I think, you know, it is important that employers do really think about that balance. I also think it's, you know, quite short-sighted to think that almost the rush of joy of working from home as a new novel thing will wear off. You know, as human beings, we're social beings, aren't we? We like to be with other people, and much like a lot of HR practice, you do tend to see that things come full circle. So it will be interesting, you know, I was smiling before when you were talking about the future. I know we'll come on to that later, but, you know, at what point will we almost come full circle where people want to be in the office more than they want to be at home? It will be an interesting thing to watch, I think.
But in terms of allowing flexible working now, which I think is going to become the normal in the near future as people recover and from the pandemic, what's your own thoughts about your office premises, about how you will shape those? Is it about changing the physical space within the footprint that you have?
Yeah, definitely. And I think it will be different because we are in 6 geographical locations across the Northwest. So each one will have its own difference and nuance, depending, not least, of course, when leases are due. But as I say, our main focus now, and I think perhaps has been more on sort of client experience, I think is shifting more towards the employee experience and how it feels to come into work and attracting people to want to come and work for us and with us. And I think that focus is a slight difference perhaps than what we've seen before. But it's very much the case that, you know, we continue to grow. We see great opportunity in Liverpool and obviously our other regions as well, our other offices as well. So I think, you know, we will hopefully continue to grow in each of those areas, and obviously Liverpool's are a key strategic move for us.
Excellent, great, thanks for that. Thanks, Stephen. If I can come to you, as we're obviously well known, you're head of Avison Young's offices in Liverpool, but obviously connected through that network into the national perspective. Just a particular from the Avison Young recovery indexes we're getting, where does Liverpool fit in other major cities, northern cities, particularly the Liverpool office market as it is at this moment in time?
Yeah, I mean, you know, nationally, return to office has been pretty slow, but certainly, you know, you look at London, it's been incredibly slow down there. The latest figures from the City Recovery Index, and they'll be updated today. I think they get updated weekly. So return to office last week stood at 66.1%. So obviously still way off where we were, and 100% being February of last year. But if you look at the likes of the mobility index is now at 111 compared to last year. And you sense that when you're coming in on the roads, don't you, yourself? It's definitely a lot busier around. Hospitality opening up, and particularly with indoor, you know, will help this week as people become more engaged. You've referenced Castle Street already. So, I mean, in general terms, Liverpool's come out of recovery really well compared to other cities nationally. I think the retail helps in that context because, you know, that open streetscape that we've got at Liverpool One, you know, the public realm, you know, the green space, Shavas Park, they all help, the waterfront itself. So there's a lot of positives really. And I think that then comes back to the office conversation as well, doesn't it? Because environment outside the office as much as inside of the office is key to getting people back into cities to work. And I think Liverpool's in a very strong position from that perspective.
Yeah. So what do you think we as a city need to do to improve that? I mean, obviously you are the chair of the MIPIM delegation for Liverpool and have led that successfully over recent years. We've always pushed and ourselves to the forefront of MIPIM, but MIPIM is an opportunity for us to sell ourselves on a world stage. But how do you think we do that now? I mean, the last 12 months have been interesting, and I think, you know, picking up on what Andy said earlier on, you know, you go back to 12 months, you know, just over 12 months ago when we were looking to go out to Cannes in March last year. And, you know, there was a real positivity in the city because we did have you know, we had a really good message. There was lots of good things going on. Over the course of the last, you know, 12, 14 months, we've moved to that, you know, virtual world that we're all sat in here on this panel today. And to be honest, Bill, what it's given us the opportunity is to access a broader audience in some ways, and a higher quality as well in terms of people who we've been able to engage with. We've forged good relationships with the likes of Estates Gazette through their Future of Cities programme. We've had FDI, which is part of the Financial Times,
involved in a couple of webinars with us. We've had Investment Monitor, which is part of the New Statesman Group. And that, as a follow-up on an event that we did, they actually ran a piece on Liverpool in their publication at the back end of last year. You know, LREF, the London Real Estate Forum, we've been invited to, and we're going to that one. There's literally, it's normally just London, but we'll be there next year with the West Midlands. So I think, you know, I've since taking over as chair, I've always said, and, you know, Sean Beach prior, it's not about a week in Cannes. You've got to sell the story throughout the course of 12 months. And I think we're doing that really, really well. We can do more, obviously, but I think keeping it at that thought leadership level and talking about topics as opposed to being kind of project-led, which we tended to do a little bit in the past, it's definitely given us access to a wider audience and therefore a bigger investment pool. And I say investment from both a capital perspective, but, you know, again, picking up on Andy's theme, that it's occupiers that we need in the city. So we need to do more and more in that space to attract occupiers and make sure that Liverpool is higher on the rung of the ladder when it comes to those businesses looking to make decisions.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of where Liverpool's positioned as vis-a-vis other cities, you know, we've seen Leeds coming up on the rails with Channel 4, with Bank of England. But we're also hearing now that London office market is devastated. I've not been into London for over a year now, and I'm hearing that the centre of London is a very different place than where it was. And do you think that Liverpool's position now, actually, from a hospitality point of view, we're talking about Liverpool being a safe space to come in post-pandemic because it's close to the sea, close to the countryside. Do you think that Liverpool will now have advantages because of its positioning? Perhaps because it's not overpopulated in terms of office.
Yeah, I mean, I think the reality is London is always going to be a powerhouse, isn't it? That isn't going to change, and people will go back to it. But yeah, absolutely, there's an opportunity for Liverpool for us to get our narrative right in that space. But I think the important thing is that we focus on what we're good at. So, you know, you look at Paddington Village, why is it a success? It's because it's, you know, in health and life sciences, Liverpool is global leading in certain elements of like the health and life sciences. Not all of it. It's a very, very, you know, it's a relatively small amount. But off the back of that, you know, you've got RCP going into the spine. I had the privilege of having a tour around the spine. And it's a phenomenal building, you know, the healthiest building in the world. So that shows what the art of the possible is for us. So I think if we focus upon those key things like health, life sciences, digital, creative, culture, and then trades, you know, post-Brexit, free port status, you know, maximising the opportunity through the free port as well, then all of those different components can come together to help us in putting that narrative out there for people to come to Liverpool.
Yeah, and of course, you've just mentioned the Knowledge Quarter and the health sector, and we haven't really seen the impact of the Knowledge Quarter on the city yet, because it's just coming towards, Spine's just being completed in another couple of months, then people will start occupying, and we'll see really a real transition and a move up there. Do you think that will move people away from a commercial district to that area, or will
it's a different offer? And you know, it's clustered around health and life sciences. You know, the commercial district still has a place, still has a role to play from, you know, a financial and professional services perspective. So it's not one or the other. Much as we're not saying that it's home working or office working, it's a blend, then it's absolutely the same. But what you do need is that bridge between, you know, the upper central area, the bridge between Paddington Village and the Knowledge Quarter down into Liverpool to link everything together. And I think that's a huge opportunity for the city moving forward as well.
Yeah, well, we are getting quite a number of questions coming in, and if I can just turn to some of those questions, and if I can direct the first one perhaps to you, Andrew. We've been asked a question about, will we see a large portion of office space in Liverpool become vacant, become not usable, and then will we see that converted into residential? I mean, that has been a move pre-pandemic from some of the older stock, but what do you think will happen with that?
I think the opportunities have been taken. They were done between 2010 2014. The actual stock that we have is quite evident. There's not a lot of it. They are the best buildings that are left. All the ones which had the opportunities to convert, some of which, in my opinion, shouldn't have been. They should have remained as offices, have been converted into residential or alternative use. The cost to now do that and the timescales on leases within those set buildings will mean it's too difficult to be done.
So you don't think that we're going to see any increase in that because of the pandemic?
Potentially maybe on a very small scale. So in some buildings where, I mentioned earlier, flight to quality. People are wanting to have a building or have an office which offers their employees something which is more than what their house can offer them. Otherwise, why would someone come back to work? You've got the freedom, as Julie said, you can go for a run at lunchtime. You can have your lunch, you can go for walk the dogs in the morning, in the afternoon, and you can work your diary around you. But if you're wanting to come back into the office or you want your employees to, you need to offer the amenities. And it's no longer being led by an FD, it's by the HR managers who are going, actually, the employees are the most important part of the business. Make them comfortable, make them want to be in the office, and they'll come back. Everyone, even the head of Zoom has said he's fed up with Zoom meetings. I am as well. I want to meet people more again and get back to real life. And I just don't see offices just all of a sudden becoming residential buildings. The poorer quality ones, the ones where it's cheap and cheerful, you might see that, but again, the cost of conversion for those buildings, they're usually period buildings in Liverpool. It's not like they're a 1980s built building that's purpose built for an office. It's a building that's been hashed about and made into an office.
Yeah, and of course with those rents at the levels you're talking about, because of investment in the buildings, then the market is there, isn't it? So it will make then landlords think about, actually, I can get a better return if I start to invest in the building. We'll get higher higher rents, and it will then be that circle that we'll see the office stock improving in the city.
Yeah, and that's the dream. That's what everyone wants, isn't it? We want to see our city improve and have a better quality offering. As Steve said, the Spine, it's one of the best buildings I've ever been into. You go in there and you do feel like you're in a special building. That is going to be at the forefront of everyone's agenda. ESG and people wanting to have net carbon zero buildings and doing something a bit different, stepping out of that traditional, let's just go and build a glass box and fill it with Cat A specification and someone will take it. It needs to be more. Yeah.
Just a more practical level, a question here coming in from the same person asking about what's the current signs in the office market in terms of what's the health of the office market from a landlord perspective? Are rents being received? When we're hearing in retail and hospitality, levels of rent repayment is significantly below that. Mm-hmm. What about in the office market?
Clients that I'm dealing with, rental retention's been probably the highest it's been before COVID, mainly because the attention's been on it. So people have actually been chasing debts, making sure people pay, and where you've had flexible leases in place. So I know that in the Baltic Triangle and the Baltic CIC, they were full pre-pandemic. Obviously, a lot of that's on a flexible basis. Those people decided that, well, I'm going to work from home. I don't need my office. I think they lost quite a lot of their tenants. But through the ecosystem they created there and the culture and everyone wanting to be in location, they're back to 100% full again. People are wanting to be in offices when they can be. I think it's the SMEs that are driving at the moment, but corporates will return.
Good, thanks. Stephen, a question for you. We talked earlier about Liverpool's positioning. We're being asked the question by Ian Ray, really, on how does Liverpool's office market get out of the shadows of Manchester? Well, not that we're in the shadows of Manchester, but I understand what he was saying. Will we always be looking towards Manchester as the big brother in the corporate marketplace here in the Northwest?
I worked in Manchester for 11 years, Bill. So, and my commute into Manchester when I first went there took about an hour, and then by the end it took about 2 hours. So I mean, Manchester, again, it's quite it's quite heated, it's fair to say, isn't it? There's a lot of development there. I think you just have to view it differently to living in the shadow, to be honest with you. We're a different offer. And I think you focus upon, again, it comes back to what I said before, focus on what we're good at as a city, what's our USP, what differentiates us. So it's not about competition. And actually, in some ways, and again, you look at from a health and life science perspective, rather than competing, actually we can collaborate together quite well, because 40 miles is nothing in the scheme of things for an overseas investor. And actually you can start to look at the likes of Manchester, the Oxford Road Science Corridor, Daresbury, Alderley Park, Liverpool Knowledge Quarter, then in the context of actually creating something that's much more from a collaborative perspective, and it's powerful then, and that can help you to attract bigger and better occupiers. So focus on what we're good at is key. And I never like to think of us living in the shadow of Manchester in any context.
Of course, as you just said then, the ability to get into and out of a centre is very important. And when HS2 comes along and the further announcements about that, so we will be within 20 minutes of the centre of both cities. So why, I mean, it's time, isn't it, apart from on the football field, to move away from competition, to work out about complement. Yeah. That's the key to it.
Yeah, totally agree. And you are, mentioning infrastructure there, Bill, is important for the success of the city. And again, picking up on the ESG theme, there's an opportunity for Liverpool, I think, to do something unique in that space. We do have, green space, we've got the waterfront, etc. There's a lot of positives there that we can use from an ESG perspective. We have to be bolder in that space, but why can't we be the city that is, one of the first to, maybe be car free, or whatever. We all like our commute home. I think is, to just give that gap between the working day and our normal day. But, there are things that can be done from a city perspective that will make us different and unique.
Okay. Andrew, some technical questions for you. You've just completed the report. The question there from Sean Collins-Jones. What proportion of that take-up figures that you've just reported on is new business taking space, or how much of it is churn?
I haven't done the analysis on last year's figures. I have previously, and inward investments, on the face of it, we're not as good as some of the cities. They have chosen other cities for whatever reason. That's something we need to work on. But we have, over the last, if you analyse over the last 5 to 10 years, there've been a lot of newcomers to this city. They have traditionally started in a small footprint of maybe taking serviced offices, and then they've grown into a much larger outfit. RCP, for example, they were looking at Leeds and Manchester, and they chose Liverpool because of the offering. You've then had a number of different occupiers come here as well, and north shoring and near shoring is definitely something that needs to be a good target for us, but we don't have the stock anymore. So it's going to get less and less as we go forward until we have availability for larger footprints. I think the largest floor plate is probably 25,000 square foot. The largest any building could probably offer is 50, but that's not even over contiguous floors. So when someone like a Sky or your Channel 4 come and look here, yeah, there's an opportunity, but there's risk for them. It's 4 years away. It's not coming out the ground. It's not going to be ready in 12, 18 months. And, you can touch and feel it. It's something where, it could happen. That's not good enough. That it can't be the way we live. We can't be hoping for 100% let utopia. That's the worst thing that could ever happen to the city. You need to have that stock. You need to have new stock coming through, which makes the building I'm sat in look like second class, not still the best. It was built in 2011. That's the fundamental needs to change.
So how do you think we change that mindset? And all of you come into this. How do we change that mindset? I mean, clearly it's a pounds and shillings, isn't it? And pence. It's really about the fundamental mathematics of development, that it costs X to build and the returns are Y, and Y has to be higher than X unless you provide public subsidy. Is there a way to break that?
I think that we're starting to see the first stages of that change as the rents are going higher. So it's beginning to make sense rather than, oh, I can't do anything without gap funding. That being said, you know, other cities seem to do it. You're looking at Salford, the council there gave wrappers for the buildings to be developed, which then led to some speculative development, which actually now is absolutely heart of the city, whereas you would have thought that was peripheral 5 years ago. The same happened in Chester, where they did it with the Muse scheme, City Place. And that forthright thinking from the council is something which will definitely help. It's just got to be collaborative with the developers.
Julie, yeah, if you come back into that.
Yeah, just also add, I think we've got massive opportunities with the Pall Mall development. You know, what they could do with that space now, that is literally levelled at the moment. So what they can build on that, I mean, I know it's going to take some time, as Andrew said, but the opportunities for what we can build on there, you know, we could replicate the healthiest building, like with the Spine. We've got great opportunities there. And I think over the last 12 months, people have been keeping their money in their pockets, and hopefully they will look to spend that now, because I think the future of Liverpool city centre is going to be amazing. And I know I am a big optimist, but I really truly believe that the opportunities with the Freeport and everything else, Liverpool is definitely the place to invest and build for the future.
Great, thanks for that. We've been asked about how do we, and we've talked about it earlier, Nicola, about how we see workspaces changing. But how do you think workspaces will change to cater for different sectors? Particularly how you see workspaces adapting to a different, perhaps a creative or a professional services. Is it about creating flexible space? So we build a shell, we do the fit out in a way that allows that flexibility. Well, another question actually, and we'll come on to talk about it, is the issue around broadband supply, but just about office design into the future. Do you see that changing?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think, you know, you go back, gosh, I'm trying to think when it was, when Google's offices were the offices that everybody wanted to work at. And I think the likes of WeWork have come along and brought that out much more to be something that you could actually see. And I think more and more office spaces are starting to take on that sort of concept that is a flexible workspace that allows areas for collaboration, flexible meeting spaces, flexible conference spaces. And I do think that will be, you know, that's what people want to see, isn't it? Because it's everywhere you look. When you look into office spaces, those are the areas that are held up as being what everybody wants to almost aspire to have. So I do think that we will probably see that becoming more of a trend. I also think this point around technology, I know you're going to talk about broadband in a second, but you know, doing these Zoom meetings, recording podcasts and all things like that, the traditional workspaces aren't necessarily set up to have those spaces for people to be able to go and have that quiet time away with the correct recording equipment and lighting and all the rest of it. So I think you'll probably see technology becoming much more of an area of focus for those office spaces to be really kind of on point with this mixed blend of working, and making sure that it can almost cross over, whether you're at home or in the office, you can still have the ability to do those sorts of events.
Just following on from that point then, there's another question that we've been asked about. Do we think there's new office developments around a shared hub concept for various sectors? People in the financial services used to travel to Manchester or Leeds, but would much prefer to attend a financial services hub in Liverpool. Are we seeing that grouping of sectors and businesses around a shared hub?
Not that I'm aware of, Bill. I've not heard that, but again, the drivers of that shared hub will more than likely be, or I would have expected it to be, the corporates to make it stack for any developer to do so. And as I said earlier, at the moment they're not sure exactly what their future plan is. It'd be a bit too early to say that, I think.
Yeah, I mean, we have a question also about the use of the larger retail spaces that might be in Liverpool that might be becoming vacant. Actually, one of the things you'd already picked up on, a lot of that vacancy has already been taken out of the system, and we have very limited of that. Obviously, there have been some big names on the high street in particular recently. I'm thinking of Arcadia and also Debenhams that have both closed. But the good thing about those is that both of those properties are owned by Grosvenor Liverpool Fund, who are, as we know, are here for medium long term and are already looking at encouraging and bringing retail uses into those spaces. So I'm not too sure that there will be a major issue around that. And if you saw my piece yesterday talking about the permitted development rights, which obviously is a concern for us in the cities and particularly out in the hubs, about the conversion of retail into residential. I think there's something that we have to be careful about, but I don't think it's a major issue for us in the city. But you got any views on that?
I think you're right, Bill. That there's still strong demand from the retail sector for Liverpool, and you see, there's been a number of new entrants come into the city, hasn't there, over the through lockdown, both in the hospitality and the retail sense of things. So I don't think that's a particular issue for the city centre, but undoubtedly it is for some of the towns. There's a lot of large space that is vacant. And I think, there is no doubt that a lot of our towns in the region are overpopulated with retail space that do need to be repurposed. But for me, the important thing in that context is that, you're delivering something that is meaningful for the communities there. And again, it comes back to having that USP and identity for each of those towns that, let's face it, a lot have lost that identity over the years. They just become homogenized versions of each other. So I think getting that identity and uniqueness back into our towns is important, and a way of doing that is through the repurposing of space.
Yeah, good, thanks. And a question from Mark Jones, who's asking about, do we have a method of measuring footfall and being able to differentiate between office workers and visitors? Well, that's something that we do have access to, and we are working at developing that. I'm talking about with Liverpool BID Company. Of course, AY also have the same, have data on that, don't you?
Yeah. We use mobility data. I mean, it's quite funny in the context of some of the anti-vax nonsense that's out there, Bill, that people are worried about being injected by by Bill Gates, but they're walking around with mobile phones where you can be tracked everywhere you go. So some good data out there. And as you say, in our recovery index, we use mobility data that shows how people are returning to the city. And obviously you'll see that in a retail context, but also that feeds into the return to office index that we have as well. Which, the recovery index, it's multiple, different sources, subsets of information that then come together to provide the overall for the city. So I posted the link onto the chat earlier on, so it's well worth people having a look at it and get in touch if you want to hear more.
Great, thanks, Stephen. And there's a question from Paul Faulkner, who always asks difficult questions. But Paul would like to know, do we think that the current difficulties at Liverpool City Council will affect prospects of support from the city for new office projects? We've talked about new office projects. We've talked about changes in Pall Mall, and we know that they were working on the work of filling the space. We've heard about changes, but any thoughts on the situation in the City Council? Obviously, we have a new mayor in post. We have a new cabinet in post as well. But from a business perspective, from an office market perspective, will that have impact on the investment coming in?
My take, my take is that the conversations I've had with some of the bigger funds is it isn't an issue for us. I think in Tony Reeves, you've got a strong chief executive there. We've now got a new mayor come in as well. So I think, we have to continue the positive messaging from a city perspective and keep that investment narrative out there. I think, as I say, my bigger concern is around attracting occupiers into the city, and that's what we really need to focus upon. And I think the capital investment will follow.
Yeah.
I'd echo what Stephen said, but I also actually think it's turned it into a positive. The fact that the commissioners are overlooking all our planning processes will make it even better. So, it'll be more transparent, and if they need fine tuning to improve them, that's what's going to be done. So Liverpool is probably the best place that they could choose to invest and develop.
My 2 pennies worth. I think in the short term, the structure that's probably in the council is going to slow things down. It's not going to be as quick as you'd expect in another regional city. As Julie said, though, hopefully it's for the better. Hopefully it sees proper sustainable development happen in the city centre and come forward. In terms of Pall Mall, just going back to Paul's comment, I think if someone came along and said they wanted 100,000 square foot on there, the council will be all over it to try and help. It makes, why wouldn't they? Whoever's in charge, it makes perfect sense for the city. The right thing is to do the right thing for the city.
Thanks, Andrew. And final, just a couple of points, and we'll come on to them. Perhaps you can include some of this in when you're talking about your views on the future. The question again is around about how do we make office development stack up if we need to increase rents, but also costs are rising, and construction costs we're hearing are rising exponentially. So what's the secret to actually breaking that cycle and actually being able to bring speculative office developments into the city that will see that stimulation in rents, but also provide a return for investors?
I think in terms of 3 years ago, when the rents were sub £20 a square foot, it never stacked in a million years without grant funding. The fact rents are moving on is making it more and more sort of making it should stack, or it's getting close to stacking. The rents moving up is just a sign of quality offerings being brought forward as well, and the city improving the whole of the stock, not just 1 or 2 buildings. And that's what's needed to make it so that people look at the competition and go, actually, if I develop in there, people are willing to pay a higher level. So yeah, it might not stack at day 1 today. Someone might say, oh, it doesn't. But if people are aspiring to pay higher rents, if I build something that knocks your socks off, why wouldn't they want to be in that building? It's something different. It's something better. It's just got to be. You've got to keep pushing the boundaries.
Great, thanks, Andrew. Now we're coming towards the end of our hour. These hours fly when we're out in panel. But the final question for all of you, and I'll come to Julie first. What's your aspirations? Where do you want to see the commercial district in 1 year, 5 years, and 20 years?
Well, as you know, Bill, we're going through our reballot with the commercial district bid, and it's now going to be called the Commerce and Culture bid, and that's on the 11th of June. So in the very short space of time, hopefully we'll see the expansion of the commercial district bid, and it'll go from the waterfront right through the current commercial district up to St George's Quarter. And I think that, that expansion of the business community will be, great for the city centre, and the opportunities I can see in this area, and everything Andrew said about the building and, the cost of building. But it's not just about the office, it's not just about the building, it's about the surroundings and the city centre as a whole. And that's what people are investing in, and that's what people need to think about, because, you can't beat our waterfront, you can't beat our cultural offerings in Liverpool. And for me, I think, before lockdown, it was a thriving city, but it's just going to be better and better as time comes on, with the free ports, with the cruise liners that come to the city. For visitors, people can't visit a better city as far as I'm concerned. But for people living and working in the city centre as well, there's just so much to offer. Why would you choose another city?
Thanks, Julie. Thanks. It's great. Nicola, for your thoughts, the future of the city that you've, Napthens have invested in.
Yeah, I think, again, just to echo everything that Julie just said there, there's just so much opportunity. And I think, again, in reference to where Stephen was talking about, that it is just a unique city and a unique offering. And I think it's just exciting to see now what will sort of rise out of the ashes of COVID, and how the city will respond, and how all businesses will respond, actually. And I think we're all sort of in this together, and we're all in on a path now to actually building a better future So I think it's just exciting to see what the next few years are going to hold for us.
Stephen?
I think first of all, Bill, we all need a shot in the arm of Julie's optimism. And I think she's absolutely right as well, that we need to be optimistic and bold, for the city and the city's prospects. I mean, the key is quality. That flight to quality that we're seeing from occupiers. And as I said earlier on, that's not just from what's within the four walls of the building, but what's outside of it as well. And Liverpool has a lot to offer in that context. And, as the waterfront, as Julie's referenced, our cultural heritage, there are so many positives for us. So I think shaping that inward investment proposition is vitally important for us going forward, so that we can attract those new occupiers to the city. And I think, it's an exciting time. It's been a tough 12, 14 months, through COVID, but that positivity is still there. That was in place last year. The building blocks are there. So let's look forward to, the next 3 to 5 years of the cityscape changing.
Great, thanks. And Andrew, if we can come to you for the final words today. You're chair of the property group of Professional Liverpool. What's the future for you, but also for Professional Liverpool?
So you asked in terms of years 1, 5 and 20. So I think the first year, no more lockdowns, so that some confidence can return to the market. People, as soon as they have confidence, will want to start doing things. Julie's confidence, that's what everyone needs. Over the next 5 years, I'd like to see a net carbon zero building being brought forward in the city, and there's being cutting edge, as delivering something which is the envy of other regional cities as well, not just following in on the coattails 3 to 5 years later. And then in 20 years' time, I would like to see us being top of the tree in terms of footloose requirements, wanting to come to the city, wanting to see the benefits of being here, and seeing how their business can grow in Liverpool, not in Manchester, not in Leeds. There's so many positive things that we've all spoken about, and everything that marries with just bringing your business here. It's all the added benefits.
Great, thanks, Andrew. And thank you all for attending. Unfortunately, we can't get to answer all of those questions, but we will pick those up and respond to them, and answers will go on our website. So thank you on behalf of Professional Liverpool and Liverpool BID Company for attending today. Hopefully we will be in person shortly at an event when we can actually all come together without socially distanced, and we can celebrate this great city of Liverpool. But until then, stay safe. We wish you all well, and thank you for attending today. Bye now.